God's will and me. As I was growing up, reading the Divine Principle, reading the Bible, I found it quite easy at times to read about these important historical figures and about the mistakes they'd made. And you sort of end up thinking to yourself as a young child, "You fool! What's wrong with you?" I mean, such simple things. If Moses just didn't hit that rock. I mean, seriously, how many times in your life have you hit a rock out of frustration? You don't need to do it. Why, Moses? And I think it's easy with the power of hindsight to know that that moment was a point in God's providence. God's will was that you do X, Y, or Z, and that to do anything else would be ridiculous. But then in our lives, I think there are many moments of providence, many moments of God's will. And do we make the right choices? Do we do the right things? I think at the moment, in the climate that we're in, it's definitely a very challenging period for the human race. Certainly, if you're in any way political, economic, religious. If you're none of those, I don't know if there's anything left. But if you read on any of those topics, you'll know that we are in a period that many commentators say is the most uncertain period we've ever been in. And I think that causes people to question what path we're going down. So to sort of talk about one of those elephants in the room. After the US presidential election, I was on social media, which may have been a mistake, but I was. And reading through some comments that people had left on a certain page, which again, I don't normally do because it makes me angry, but I did it anyway. And I noticed someone had written something, and I'm paraphrasing, I haven't got an exact quote, but someone said something along the lines of, "I think Donald Trump's victory was the will of God." Which is fine if that's your genuine belief. I'm not here to judge people's political persuasions at all. But my wife, who'd managed to read the same thread, asked me later, what do you think? I think she was a bit tentative to see what my response would be. She's always interested to see what my religious and political opinions are. And I don't mind saying, and I'm sorry if I offend anyone, but I thought it was a bit of a garbage comment. Why? I need to clarify that. And I think for me it's because regardless of my actual political opinions, I feel like that phrase, "it's the will of God," is used a lot to abdicate from human responsibility. No matter how pious you are and how much you believe in the power of God, fundamentally, human beings turned up to physical places and ticked a box, or in America's case, sometimes on an electronic thing, which may have been rigged by the Russians if you read the wrong newspapers. But at any rate, human beings were involved in this process. Human beings thought about consciously the decision they needed to make and made a decision and carried that out. And that's why I feel like whilst God obviously has plans, God has ways of working, ultimately we as human beings need to take responsibility. And it says that very clearly in the principle. If we look at the section on predestination, nothing is absolutely preordained, is it, in our lives? At least we don't believe it is. That God may be doing his 95% of responsibility. God is certainly working, but we as human beings always have our 5%. And the way I like to think of that is, if you think about a novel or a book, and you delete the last 5% of that book, it would kind of be, in many ways, the worst part of the book to get rid of. It's kind of key. Without it, the rest of the book, would you not agree, is ruined. Maybe. My wife has an auntie. She always reads the last few pages of a book to find out what the ending is. before committing to read the book. Because if the ending's rubbish, it's likely the whole book is. At least that's the way she operates. But I think that, and this is in no way to diminish, obviously, the many fantastic things that God does, the work that God is doing in our lives. I don't want to do that at all. But I feel that as human beings, we have to always be keenly aware of our responsibility and what the importance of this moment, this action may be. Because as I said at the beginning, we're not fully aware of whether this moment we're living in is a key moment. Maybe not, it may not be in the global providence. It may be in the providence of you, your own personal journey, and your own personal relationship with God and how you spread that with others. So I think in that sense as well, the question then becomes, how do we tune in to what the right thing to do is? How do we tune in with what the most godly path is? Because I think it is in these real life decisions that we make the choice to live a life of God or not. It's not always, I think it's in some ways easy to come to Sunday service and agree with everyone here that we all, believe in God. I think we've got that far. Hopefully believe in true parents. I think we've got that far. Those things are easy to agree on, but then there are the difficult choices. Certainly, and again, I don't want to prejudge the way anyone arrived at any conclusions on these kinds of recent matters, but I've heard people say with the Brexit vote, I voted Remain because it's more principled. And whilst that may be true for them, and who knows, it may actually be true, I don't want to prejudge it, but we need to find a way of coming to those conclusions and not just sort of flippantly make them, if that makes sense. Because I think these are big decisions we're helping decide the path of a nation. But equally, the way that we interact as a community, the way we talk about these subjects, affects the way we head as a community and as a people. And so I think that returns me to one of my favourite sort of topics of discussion, which is the foundation to receive the Messiah. And that is comprised of two parts, is it not? So the first aspect of the foundation to receive the Messiah, let's get a bit of crowd participation. Does anyone recall? Thank you, Uncle Philip. The foundation of faith. So the foundation of faith, the way I read it and I understand it, is very much about our vertical relationship with God. It's about becoming people of faith, but having that as a relationship. And we have a lot of give and take with things in our world. We choose what to have a relationship with. And it's difficult to know whether those things are heavenly. Difficult to know all the time. Certainly our community sometimes is split on these issues. But we need to engage with these things because the second aspect of the foundation to receive the Messiah is? Exactly. The foundation of substance, where we talk about it in very biblical terms, Cain and Abel relationship. But I think about this purely as it's a relationship of people. It's difficult to see how we can bring about God's absolute will, which is to be one human family, if we omit other members of that family. And I think we all know or have experienced people where they have the foundation of faith absolutely sorted. More pious people you will not meet. And yet, when it comes to that foundation of substance, bringing someone else on that journey to being part of God's family, they struggle. And because it is very much a struggle. I'm sure if we started to, if I engaged you all in debate, at some point it may get heated. It may get to a point where our emotions are wrought and we don't actually feel that overwhelming sense of godly love for one another anymore, because there are many challenging topics and many challenging moments where that can happen. But I very much think that in this time, in this age that we're in, my strong sense is that humanity is divided. For whether you want to see it as there's a good side and an evil side, whether you think that one opinion is right and one opinion is wrong, I think in many ways doesn't matter, if I can be so bold as to say that. Because ultimately, even if we are on the side of righteousness, there is no point in being on that side if we don't take people with us. So I think, for me, the way I would see it is that I want to rebadge, if you will, the three blessings that God gave us. To be fruitful, to multiply, and to have dominion. And I think we're very clear that what that means to us as a movement. It means to achieve self-perfection, to have a family, and to have a dominion over creation. But if I may rebrand it for a moment, I think it can also very much apply to the way that we live our lives in terms of God's will and in terms of how we live with others. So I think in terms of bearing fruit, we need to be people who do good deeds, who have fruit to show for their faith, who can then multiply that with others and share it with others. It's all very well and good talking a big game and talking about the things that we believe in, but we need to be able to show that in our society. And there are a lot of people today who are suffering, who are in need of that little bit of God's love. And I think in that sense, they can only move to the next stage as well if they are able to engage in giving as well. And I think in terms of having dominion, we also then need to be accountable and take responsibility for our views, our opinions, and the way we act. It's very easy to rely on other people to provide you with an opinion or with a feeling or with a sense of where to go. And for me, in that sense, that also means that although there would be a layer of irony to it, if you wholeheartedly disagree with my sermon and my words, you should feel free to do that and own that. And, well, whilst I wouldn't encourage any heckling or coming up to me afterwards with too much anger, I think you should feel within your rights that just because I'm standing here in a theoretical, able position, maybe, if you want to badge it as such, doesn't mean that you don't have the right to disagree with me. You don't have the right to understand God's will in your own right and bring something heavenly from your viewpoint as well. If you've come to that conclusion with a deep and sincere relationship with God. So, I don't want to take too long labouring this point, because I think hopefully I've stirred up some feelings and thoughts within people that you either disagree with me absolutely or you think some of the things I've said are correct. But in this world we live in now, whatever decisions get made, whatever happens, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, almost. I would encourage everyone, and I hope that everyone, to summarise, first of all, actively seeks out that deep relationship with God to inform all of our decisions and the way we act, but also reaches across the aisle, because I think we can see now that there's a lot of bitterness out there. People being called liars and frauds and all kinds of things from a position of not trying to understand, not trying to love, but trying to conquer. And I think we need to have a spirit of trying to move forward in love and move forward in a way that God would be pleased with. Because God will work with whatever he has. If history has taught us anything, it's that God has been given many unideal situations, many unideal human beings to be the focal point of the providence. But he will move forward. But we can help that process move forward faster through our love, through our strength, and through our deep, sincere relationship with God. So I feel like that's a bit short maybe, but I want to conclude there because I think I'm very much about short, powerful messages and not trying to make anyone fall asleep. So hopefully you're all happy with both of those things. Please join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much that we can be gathered here today on this Sunday morning as a community of people with so many special attributes, so many special things to bring to the table. Father, you love us all so deeply. Without each of us happy and with you, you cannot be whole. Father, I pray that we too can inherit that heart, that we can have the attitude to never be still, to never rest, until each of our brothers and sisters is embraced in your love and indeed, Father, embraced with our love. I pray, Father, that in this coming week and as we draw to a close of what has been an unsettling year for many people, that we can build our own strength to build fresh bridges, to build a world that you can be proud of, and we can be sons and daughters that you can be proud of. I'd like to pray and report this now in my name, Stephen Huish, husband and father of the Huish Blessed Central family, Arju.